Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Chanis with Heritage Auctions, and I have Jeff Mann here, 24-year veteran of industrial light and magic, who knows about this type of thing. And Jeff, I want you to discuss with us what exactly is Y-Wing number one. What are we looking at here?
Y-Wing number one is in the process of building spaceships for motion control or miniatures for movies. You build things. You want to build a spaceship that's exactly like this, but you want it to be hollow, because you want it to be hollow so you can be able to have an interior where you can mount an aluminum armature to be able to hold it from the side, from the top, from the front, from the bottom, and that allows you flexibility in shooting.
Right.
And you also want it hollow because you have engine lights, projector lamp engine lights, running lights that are all different color temperatures. So those are different wires going to all these places. And every time you change the mounting point, you have to run the wires to a different location.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
it's got to be accessible inside. So to do that, we would build what we call a pattern, or a master buck is kind of a slang term for it. And what you do is you create the ship exactly, the external of it exactly like you want it to be, and then you make a mold of it. And that mold enables you to cast a variety of materials, whatever you want, into that void, and then you can take that mold apart, and you'll have one of these that's hollow.
Okay.
And that hollowness allows us to do whatever we want inside of it. This is what I call Y-Wing number one, and it's the very first in 1975 or 6, I'm not sure exactly, was what the ILM model shop on Valjean in LA, Grant McCune running the model shop, John Dykstra, those folks set about making Y-Wings and X-Wings. And they would start by making a pattern like this, and then making molds that they can make multiples. So you can make hero spaceships for motion control. You can make pyro ships.
For the explosions.
For explosions, right. And all that. So you have a lot of different options once you've got a mold
that makes sense.
You can cast.
So this is basically the master pattern for the Y-Wing, the first three-dimensional sculpture of the Y-Wing, and then you created molds from this to make all of the motion control pyro models, the hero ships and so forth that we're seeing in the Death Star assault sequence, for instance, in Star Wars.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So give me a little bit of a history behind it. I mean, because you worked, you started working on Jedi, I think, if that's correct.
I worked at ILM prior to Jedi, but the first Star Wars I worked on was Jedi. And so the history about it, I mean, there's some kind of, when you're making models like this, especially on Star Wars, you're looking for interesting parts to be able to detail the exterior with, because the Star Wars world is famous for having this workable, pedestrian look, like, hey, we're fixing up a hot rod, and it's,
exactly, right.
The hood's off.
See the plumbing and all the other things of it, right.
So for instance, on this ship, these nacelles, which are the engine pods, this particular part right here, we would do what's called kit bashing. All of these little, what we call greeblies, different people in the industry call them different names, greeblies or noonies, or I don't know. So,
right, sure.
But they're basically, you go to we had hundreds of model kits. You'd go to those model kits and you'd look for parts and pieces that are the size and the scale that make it look interesting or to scale.
No, that makes sense.
And so what you do, this particular piece was a Saturn V rocket kit, smooth, and then it had and then we would add all of these particular details on here.
Got it. Okay.
And then you would probably, when you're molding it, you'd have to smooth it out a little bit so that the silicone that you put on would come off.
Will not get snagged.
Yeah,
right.
Those are called undercuts.
Okay.
So once you've got this, once they had this ready to mold, they would do that. and then you could use that mold as long as the silicone held up, or different things affect that time, or that sort of thing. So this was basically made to create a whole bunch of multiples of it.
Of Y-wing, and not only for the Star Wars, but later for Return of the Jedi, correct? Because there were not Y-wings in Empire Strikes Back, if I
Right.
remember correctly. I'm a kind of a Star Wars fan here, but I don't remember seeing any in the second installment.
This was used to create all of the Y-wings that ILM built in the first, all of the Star Wars, all of the Y-wings that ILM built for A New Hope.
Yeah, New Hope, and then the yes, okay, gotcha.
And then what happened? When the show was over, A New Hope was over, the first Star Wars movie. Everything was packed up and boxed up and put into storage. And then what happened is George decided to move his company to Northern California, and so all of the spaceships, all of the gear, that sort of thing, was moved up to San Rafael and put into storage. And then there were no more Y-wings needed for Empire, like you were saying. So it really sat in storage for quite a few years.
I see.
And those storage were not fancy. They were, concrete tilt-up warehouses in a row with lots of stuff in them, and we had all kinds of those up there. We took over this whole area in San Rafael, and we started off with one building, and not even the whole building, and then it just kind of, we called it urban sprawl.
Okay, started growing from there.
And every bay had a name, and the furthest one away, for instance, was called Far Away Bay. Because,
okay. Right.
And then we got beyond. Anyway, that was part of the heritage there.
So Jeff, this was in your attic for 40 years. Tell me about that.
So I think it was 82, where we were working on Return of the Jedi, only it was called Revenge of the Jedi at that
Right.
time.
Mm-hmm.
But this was part of a process in visual effects filmmaking, in that it's this is the master pattern for creating the Y-wing spaceships, all of them, all of them for Star Wars, and then all the ones that were built by ILM for Jedi.
Okay.
And what I mean by master pattern is that when you're building something that you're going to need multiples of, and for visual effects photography, what you need is, first of all, you're under production deadline, so you want to have multiple stages going, shooting different shots and different types of activity.
Makes sense.
And so you need multiple ships. You also need things for pyro shots, where you blow them up. You want to have another one, blow it up. Didn't get that, let's get another one. So there's an endless list possibility of how many you need. So to accommodate that, what you would do is you would build a pattern. This is a exact what the Y-wing was envisioned by Joe Johnston, and how it was detailed, scaled, all of that. And so it was a piece of sculpture that represented the Y-wing, and
okay.
it needed to be made into multiple. So this pattern, we would take a mold off of it, and that mold would be taking the pattern and putting a layer of clay on it, and then over that clay you'd put plaster, and you'd have seams in it so you could take it apart.
Sure.
And then you'd take the mold apart, take the clay off, and then you'd have that mold, you could pour in any materials you wanted. Like this, for instance, we used what's called 6405, which is a variety of materials you could pour in there, and
okay.
then you could have multiple, as many as you want.
I see.
So what happened was, on A New Hope, this was built in 1976, I believe, somewhere around in there, and it was once the pattern was built, which is this, Then a mold was made and multiple ships were made. The pattern then went into, the pattern and the mold together, you went into storage, and they were in the warehouse in Van Nuys, and then George moved the company to Northern California after Star Wars. And once it got up north, everything was put into concrete tilt-up warehouses and they spread out around the San Rafael. There didn't need any more Y-wings on Empire Strikes Back, but at the middle end of Return of the Jedi, they realized they needed some more Y-wings for things like the end space battle and stuff
Sure.
like that. So Wesley Seeds, who was running the mold shop for Empire and Jedi, brought this out of storage, brought the mold and the pattern out of storage together, opened it up, and the mold was not usable through deterioration, etc. So the decision was made to make a new mold from this pattern, so you
Okay.
could continue on. And as I say, you could continue on making multiples of what you need.
Sure. Mhm.
Then during that molding and that molding process, I was in that area working on things as well, and they were having a really difficult time taking the mold apart, and it finally came apart. But the mold was usable, but the pattern itself was not usable.
I see.
So
Okay.
it was tossed.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, I thought, I'm going to fish that out, and someday maybe make something out of it, and I don't know what. And I put it in a box, and I put it in my attic, in my house, and that was 1982.
Okay.
And 40 years later, I pulled it out. I've actually looked at it quite a few times over the years, and it was, I would say, a daunting process to do something with it.
Sure.
And during the pandemic, I had some time, I have a great studio to work in, and I thought, let's see what I could do. So I did a lot of discussion with people in the industry about the best way to proceed, and I did a lot of thought about what I could do and what I needed to accomplish that, and came up with the idea that there was a lot of ideas.
Well, I'm
The
sure.
I could make a whole new one again, but this has a unique place. This particular pattern has a unique place in the Star Wars universe in that it was sort of I don't know if it's the mother or the father of all the Y-wings. So
It makes sense. This is Y-wing number one.
Right.
I mean, it was everything else. Every other Y-wing was hatched from this.
Hatched. I like that.
Yeah.
So what I did is I decided to come to do a sympathetic restoration, which is not unlike when you find something in the King Tut's tomb and it's broken but not all there, but you recreate the parts that aren't and you show it as it lived as best you can. And
Right.
that's what this is. So with this, these light gray parts are original as built years ago. The darker gray parts, these kinds of things were recreated meticulously from blueprints and scans and photography, photographs of the original ships, and then Jason Eaton, who's an amazing modeler that I know, who I like to give him a hard time because he was born about 15 years too late. He would love to have worked on Star Wars and knows everything about the Star Wars universe, and so I enlisted him to help me with this. And the process was taking the whole pattern apart, right down to the bones, and being able to. It was pretty funky, so we had to clean it up, and then Jason recreated with 3D printing parts like this, parts like the canopy, basically he drew them and grew them and printed them, painted them, and then we assembled them on.
And you did it in a darker shade so you can immediately tell it's not super obvious, but I mean, you can see, okay, these are the parts that were embellished, but precise embellishments to the original specifications, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
So the way we did the base was I didn't want to pin it all together because I wasn't interested in making ultimately it would live on a base like this, whether it had a one rod holding the whole thing up or not. But
Right.
this way, you can actually pick up pieces and feel them. And for instance, these nacelles, these were in the original building process. These were what we called kit bashed. We would find model kit parts and pieces that we could assemble and utilize. So this is this cylinder here is a Saturn V rocket model kit.
Okay.
This shape right here is the packaging for the leg stockings.
I remember those. Yes.
Perfect, right out of the box. So this kind of thing, I like the idea of being able to just pick this up, and this is what this was, one piece in the mold. You can see from, I'm going to pull this apart. This is what it was made of, how it was made.
I see even wood in there. There's wood in the construction.
This is plastic that's been, you can see it's been sort of hogged out with a Dremel tool, and made to fit. It doesn't have to be pretty on the inside. It just has to. And most of the time, the inside just supports the detailing on the outside. But yes, this is all wood. This is a plexiglass to give it a strength through the
through the spine. That's the fuselage, basically. The cockpit fuselage, and then you have the two nacelles.
Yeah, and there's R2-D2.
Right? He's poking his head out, right?
Yeah. And this is the cockpit. So this was grown 3D. This is original. And these actually are guns that come out.
Huh. Well, it's fantastic. You have basically an interactive sculpture, 3D sculpture of the very first Y-wing starfighter that created all of the ILM produced Y-wings from the first Star Wars and Return of the Jedi. It's something, you did a phenomenal job in putting this together and conceiving the way it was going to be. I can see why you sat on it for 4 decades. You put your mind to good use in that period of time.
I was daunted by it.
Right.
Actually.
Well, maybe because the thing is, yes, you could have easily been very heavy-handed and glued them together to make it look like a ship. But guess what? That's not what it really was. They were separate components. You made molds of those separate components, and then from there they created the screen-used miniatures. And so it's really a special piece.
And to me, that story of how it fit in the process was great to be able to amplify.
Right.
And I think it definitely has a place in history, and I like that about it.
Oh, no question. You preserved a piece of Star Wars history. I mean, it's a phenomenal piece. It's gorgeous to look at, and it's now going to outlive all of us.
There you go.
Knock on wood. Thank you for sharing this piece of Star Wars history with us. I mean, it's really amazing, and I know other people are going to love to watch this. Even if they don't have interest in it, but in buying it. But it is a little morsel of history that we've kind of immortalized today by you taking the time to do this.
Well,
so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I actually, this has been in my shop for a year and a half on the table being worked on, and it's been a really great project and brought back a lot of memories of the day. And
I bet.
So, my pleasure.
Great.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.